Your path to a successful career starts here with us.
Our talent development programs have created opportunities across a variety of entertainment networks.
We are building a path of empowerment where you can see yourself and be yourself, and that's with NBC Universal Launch.
As a young girl growing up, being able to see people who look like me reflected on screen, that was really important to me. From Universal Studio Group's perspective, we think it's really important that we increase our diversity efforts in front of the camera, but it's really important to have programs like NBCU Launch, increasing our diversity efforts behind the camera as well.
NBCU Launch is a comprehensive approach to creating initiatives and programs that provide access and opportunity for those who haven't gotten in the conventional way, especially underrepresented communities, including those with disabilities.
All productions can benefit from a diversity of thinking, perspectives, and ideas. At our unscripted studio, the NBCU Launch team has been a great partner in enhancing representation in various production roles.
One of the things that's most apparent to me is that NBCU Launch has continued to build on NBCU's legacy, ushering in generation after generation of new storytellers across scripted, unscripted, and late-night programming for our entertainment television businesses. We're helping to change the modern, contemporary narratives that we tell on our TV screens, and as importantly, deepening our relationships with our partners in the creative community.
The TV Writers Program will always be part of our DNA.
Getting into the program really, for the first time in my career, gave me the validation that I wasn't crazy to be pursuing this.
I had to do this program. I wanted to be Tina Fey, but Latina, so I wanted to be Latina Fey. I started out in the NBC TV Writers Program, and a lot of us are at the executive producer level now and have run their own shows. It's incredible that NBC has been my champion, and I'm so thankful to them.
I actually heard about it from a friend of mine, so I wanted to see what this was about, and ever since then, I've learned a lot of things that is going to take me forward in my career.
Seeing mentorship within alumni from our programs to people entering the programs is one of the most gratifying parts of doing what we do. It's one thing to give someone the opportunity, but it takes a lot more to really set them up for success.
My biggest takeaway from being a participant is feeling support. I remember getting this email from the organizers saying, "We are not just supporting you on one episode, we're supporting you on your career."
The next generation of creators, writers, producers, showrunners, casting executives should absolutely choose NBCU Launch to catapult their career. I think that's the beauty of Launch and NBC, is that it creates that space to foster this inclusion.
We help to launch talent, we help to grow careers, and we help to create meaningful and lasting change. That's the beauty of NBC Universal Launch, and that's why we're here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to NBCU Launch Talks, breaking into the TV industry with NBC Universal's talent development programs. My name is Robert Baltazar. I am the VP of TV Programming, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and I oversee all of the talent development programs here at NBC. NBCU Launch provides access and opportunity to talent at any point in their career in scripted, unscripted, as well as in late night. So you can follow us on our IG at NBCU Launch. So I hope you're excited for today's panel. This panel was designed to discuss our talent development programs, but also hear directly from alumni of our programs, so you can get their insights in navigating a career in the entertainment industry. Following our conversation, we'll save 20 minutes at the end for audience Q&A. So our first panelist is Jean Lee. She's a first-gen Korean-American writer-director from Allentown, Pennsylvania, who loves global cinema, genre, and stories that makes her laugh. Jean has directed in 9 languages, spanning 7 countries and 5 continents. Along with being an alum of the NBC TV Directors Program, Ryan Murphy's HALF Initiative, and AFI DWW, Jean has gone to direct on shows like New Amsterdam, the Rookie Feds for our competition, ABC, and will soon direct on NBC's The Irrational. Emman Sadorra is our second panelist. He's a first-generation Filipino-American comedy writer. Cutting his teeth in TV development, then becoming a showrunner's assistant on ABC's Blackish and NBC's Keenan, Emman was selected for the NBC TV Writers Program in 2022. A few months into the program, he is like our North Star for the program. He got staffed on Peacock's In the Know, Pitch Perfect, Bumper in Berlin, and is currently writing on NBC's St. Denis Medical, starring Wendy McClendon-Covey and David Allen Greer, and that premieres this fall. So without further ado, let's welcome Emman Sadorra and Jean Lee.
Hello. Oh, hi everyone.
Hello. Thank you.
So let's just get into it. What inspired both of you to pursue a career in the entertainment industry? We'll start off with Jean.
So I grew up outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania, and there were not a lot of Asians where I grew up. So my parents thought it would be cool to take us to an Asian church to expose us to Korean culture. And this church happened to be like deep in the Pocono Mountains at this like pseudo abandoned motel. And so my sister and I were like, this is kind of weird. And Sunday school we would ditch and go like deep into the woods to like chase magical deer. And that was sort of like the birth of my love for storytelling, genre, magical realism, and the idea that you can make sense of the world through narrative. And fast forward to college, maybe some of you guys can relate to this, but my parents were very much like, doctor or lawyer, which one do you want to be? And I made a documentary about Philadelphia's sex trafficking industry, hoping that it would be used as a way to bulk up my application for law school. And in that process, I just fell in love with storytelling and specifically directing. And so I decided to go to the dark side.
Wow. I always knew I wanted to do something in the entertainment space, specifically like in comedy, because I just loved making people laugh and it helped me feel connected to people. I think I grew up really shy and awkward, and it was easy to make friends when you're telling jokes or like drawing cartoons of your friends. When I was younger, my grandma came to live with us after her husband, my grandpa, died, and I shared a room with her, and we would watch I Love Lucy every night, like reruns every night, and that was like some of my favorite memories of growing up, and just finding that connection with her, who like didn't speak much English, and we had nothing else in common but like loving I Love Lucy. That solidified for me that I like found connection through comedy, making people laugh and telling stories, and and just like growing up in Southern California, I was like a big Disneyland person. So like going to Disneyland and going on the ride, seeing the parade and seeing how much joy that brought to people, it made me want to like work in that, something similar to that.
Coming from an Asian family, how did you get your parents on the side of you going into a creative career?
Do you want me to go first? I think I was just telling you, Robert, the other day, so I just remember when I was like 14, we had this like second or third cousin visiting us, and my mom leaned into me and she was like, this girl likes to play. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, she's an actress. And I was like, oh my God, like what is this sinful thing, So that was like, my parents. And so when I told them the heartbreaking news that I was going to go into the arts, they were shocked, but I had a plan. I said, you do not have to do anything. I will do it on my own. And so that's how they were like, okay, well, listen, you go try it for a year and then come back, and then maybe you could go to law school, right? So that was like their like holding on to hope. And so that's how I figured that out.
My parents definitely like tried to steer me in the direction of something more quote unquote practical. Like nursing was a big thing, like in the Filipino culture, is like a lot of my relatives are nurses, and I clearly didn't want to do that. But ironic, I'm working on a show right now that's about nurses, so I kind of did it. But yeah, I think they weren't believers in me in the beginning because it's a risky field for obvious reasons. But I think like they could see how serious I was about it since I was like really young, and they knew that I really did want to do this. That they didn't. I give my parents a lot of credit for just like letting me do what I wanted to do without too much pushback. So unusual for Asian American families.
Totally.
But
Your parents need to talk to my parents.
How did you get your break into the industry? What was like your first job?
I interned, when I was in college, I interned for a production company called Intrigue, and they did mostly unscripted stuff, but there was one woman there, she was the VP of development, who really liked me for some reason, and I think it's because she came to work one day and saw me cleaning the microwave in the kitchen, and she like asked me what I was doing, and I said I was cleaning the microwave because there was nothing else to do, and she liked that I was proactive, and like I had a good attitude about things. So years later, I ended that internship after the summer, never spoke to her again. And then like years later, she reached out to me because she remembered me from that microwave thing. And she had just become the head of development at a new production company and hired me to be their assistant. And that was like my first assistant job.
Wow. The microwave.
Clean the microwave, guys.
So what was the question? Is how did we break in?
Yeah. What was your first job in the industry?
So I broke in through this program. And prior to that, I was doing shorts and narrative filmmaking. I had shadowed a few times on various shows, but as you guys can imagine or have experienced firsthand, it's very, very difficult to break in. And somebody once told me, it's sort of like this, you're just like, I've worked so hard to get here, I'm prepared, like why can't you just give me a shot? Like sometimes you fall into that mentality, but at the end of the day, like when you're choosing which surgeon to operate on you, you're not gonna like give it to like the surgeon who wants it the most. You're gonna give it to the surgeon who's done 1 million operations, right? And so it's similar with TV directing, like millions of dollars are on the line. It's a well-oiled machine. There's a lot of people whose jobs are reliant on the director doing well and their days being made. And so you really have to think about like what it is that you're bringing into the table. How do you mitigate the risk of you being hired, right? And so this program was fantastic in really being very strategic in having not just the support of the staff like Robert and his amazing team, but also the executives like Lisa Katz, who's the president of Script at NBC. She threw down for this program, and all the executives like Mike Nunes and Charisse Masukawa, is that how you pronounce her name? Just so supportive. And in addition, of course, the showrunners, right? The producing directors, everybody just really, what we call in the industry, sponsoring somebody new to come in. And new, I mean like new to television, right? Like they have a whole resume of directing or writing or whatever it is. But Emman and I were just saying, you don't know how to do it until you do it, right? Like TV directing and TV writing is really an apprenticeship, as in you learn by watching other people do it and by trying it yourself. So who's going to let you do that? Well, this program did, and that's how I got my break.
Emman, what made you decide to apply to the program?
I applied to this program like 7 years in a row and got rejected each time. So I think an important quality, sorry, I feel like I'm yelling. No, an important quality that I found helped me and other people that are like doing it in the industry is just resilience and being comfortable with like rejection, because there's gonna be a lot of rejection when you're trying to do this. But yeah, simply everything you said, like just needing the support. It's such a hard industry to break into, and once you break in, it's not like, oh, you did it. Like it's hard even after you break in, because you have to keep thinking about your next step and your next job. So what the launch program offered was just like invaluable like access to people and resources that I wouldn't have had unless I was like in a program like this. So I definitely knew that I could benefit from this.
Awesome. Jean, so you've mentioned that you've directed indies and you've directed features. What is the biggest difference in directing those types of, a feature and an indie versus episodic TV directing?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would liken features and shorts to like Top Chef. I love food, so I'm going to do a lot of food analogies. So features and shorts are like Top Chef. TV directing is like New York Times baking, right? Like there's a recipe, as in there is an ethos and a culture and a visual language to a show that exists before you arrive. There's a recipe. Sure, you can embellish and elevate. You add a little sprinkle of salt to the chocolate. Your piping work looks a little different than somebody else's piping work, right? But you're not like creating like a mystery box challenge meal, right? So that's really like the difference. You have to be very strategic and economic in the way that you decide and to elevate something. And you have to do it in such a way where it's not slowing down your day or costing everybody a bunch of money. So that's the biggest difference. Baking versus cooking.
Exactly. So with TV directing, every episode of a TV show, say it's Chicago Fire or Law and Order, has a different episodic director per episode. So you're basically like a guest star on this long-running machine, which is like this huge franchise. How do you add your own personal touches? How do you add your piping to an already well-oiled machine?
In a well-oiled cake. I think that you need to study the show. Like before I went to direct on New Amsterdam, which was my first episode, it's a medical procedural. They had 4 seasons out. So I watched every single episode. These are like 22 episode seasons. My husband was like, "Can we watch something else, please?" And I was like, "No, it must be New Amsterdam." Anyways, so you really have to be fluent in the existing language in order to add new words to it, right? So it was about, okay, here's a very practical example, transitions. A lot of times you can see a director's style by seeing what shot transitions from one scene to another. So here's an example, like it's 2 people talking in a room, right? You could just end, like, let's say, on a 2 shot with just them looking at each other. You could end on a single, depending on who's the protagonist of the scene. Or maybe there's an opportunity to do a moving shot where it connects the 2 people to somebody else in the hallway looking in, and the next scene is with them. That's elevating it a little bit, right? Now let's say that there's a relationship dynamic where the person outside in the hallway doesn't like what they're talking about. So you do the moving shot and that person in the hallway is now like turning their back and walking away, right? There's just like little things that you can do to elevate. There's this, another example is the producing director of New Amsterdam, Michael Slovis. He was the DP on all the Breaking Bad episodes. So you can imagine how fantastic he is. And he was always doing really interesting small things. And one of the things he would do is he would figure out which prop was the key prop in the episode. In one of his episodes, there was a cross, a rosary that one of the characters had. And he just did this really beautiful close-up shot of the cross in the foreground, and then he racked to these undocumented patients at the hospital who were walking in, and that was the end of that scene. So does that answer your question? Just like figuring out small things to elevate.
Awesome. Emman, coming out of the program, what was the biggest surprise that you encountered when you first got into a writer's room?
This isn't a surprise, but it was like a reality shock, I guess, of like how hard it is once you get in. Is being in a comedy room specifically, you're wanting to make everyone laugh. So when your pitch doesn't have a reaction, it's very obvious that your pitch didn't work. Like in a drama, it's different. If it's like, you're not trying to make people laugh in a drama, for the most part, I don't think. But in a comedy, you do want to make people laugh. And what I quickly learned is that like, you're not gonna have good pitches all the time, but that shouldn't stop you from actually pitching. Because the reason you're there, the reason they brought me there is because they want my very specific point of view, because of my very specific experiences in growing up, to just like throw things out there, and then the showrunner can decide if that works for their vision or not. But I was like when I first started out, I was taking it very personally, where like things wouldn't hit, and I'm like, oh, I'm bad, I'm not good at this. But I would look around at the other upper level writers, and the same thing was happening to them. So it's not, I think I had to learn that this is what the gig is.
It's not personal.
It's not personal, and like you shouldn't let failure, quote unquote. I really had to reframe the way I thought of failure, because like you're gonna fail every day, and that's okay.
How did you deal with like directing your first, your first day on set, on your first episode? Like, was that challenging? Was that?
I mean, I was scared, right? I mean, let's be real. It's scary to do. I went from a $50,000 feature to an $8 million episode. Like, that scares you. And that, so people who are like, it was no problem. I'm like, lies. But there was a trick that one of the directors taught me who I was shadowing. Who was it? I think it was Allison Liddy Brown, who's a really fantastic director. And was it her? Anyways, the trick is the first shot that you do on any episode, you want to make it in 1, maybe 2 takes, because it sets the speed of the rest of the day and it shows that you are confident and prepared in your plan. So then you win the trust of your team, which is so vital to creating a successful episode, both in front of the camera and for being asked back on the show, which, by the way, is very important. You always hear, like, how do you build credibility and confidence in somebody else hiring you? Well, no better way than, like, oh, yeah, we liked Jean so much, or Emman so much on this season or this episode, so we ask them back, right? So that helps build credibility. But yeah, just making sure that you hit the ground running.
Awesome. With a focus on DEI efforts in the industry, do you still find yourself being the only one or one of a few people of color on set?
Yes.
Yes.
So knowing that, like, how do you navigate that? How do you, maintain your voice as a writer? How do you it's navigating that, just the workplace environment of being the only one.
I will say, like, it's something that I'm still learning, and it's hard. It's hard because, like, I have found in writers' rooms that, like, I'll be the voice when I notice something that is potentially problematic, and I'll call it out. But then when it starts to become like you're the only one that's saying this stuff, then people associate you with, like, the woke police or, like, whatever you want to call it.
The DEI police.
Yeah, it's like, and you don't want to be associated with that, but it's also unfair that it kind of like, it comes to you, like, it's up to you to call it out. So in my experience, it's like making sure that I have other stuff that I bring to the table besides just calling out stuff that could be potentially seen as, like, problematic or offensive. If I'm bringing other stuff to the table, then I don't feel like that's the only reason I'm there, because it can feel that way sometimes.
So Jean, as possibly the only woman on set, or, like, just like above the line, how was that? How was that managing those dynamics with, let's be honest, mostly white men?
I was thinking about this the other day, and here's, I think, if I were to go back and tell myself how to do it differently, this is what I would say to younger Jean. I would say, think about it, and then don't think about it until you need to think about it. As in, understand the reality of the world that we live in and the way that the industry looks. Another way to think about it is, like, do your research. Arm yourself and prepare yourself with statistics, facts, and numbers so that when you're met with feelings, you can speak to the truth. 2 great resources are the Gina Davis Institute and the Annenberg School of Media. And they publish numbers about the reality of diversity and inclusion in the workspace. So, for example, there was a recent published article about how I think 6% of studio films in the past, I want to say 5 years, I think that's wrong, but 6% is correct, have been held by female directors. 6%. That's not even talking about, like, race and ethnic diversity, right? So just downloading that into your brain and then being prepared with the reality, and then when you walk in, you focus on the work. You don't think about, like, I'm the only Asian person, I'm the only woman, I'm the only person under 40 here at this table, right? You just do the work to the best of your ability, and then if it comes up, somebody makes a comment or whatever, or Emman needs to be like, excuse me, right? Then you say something, but you're prepared for it. I think that's how you survive that.
What is the biggest piece of advice you would give someone who is applying to one of our programs?
Lean into your uniqueness, and like I will say that there is a lot of power in vulnerability, both like in the writers' room, but even like just applying to the program. Like, I think the reason I didn't get in for the 7 years I applied for so long was because I wasn't leaning into what makes me different. And I think because a lot of times those things that make us different are scary to share. Like, this is why I'm other, this is why I feel like I'm not part of the group or whatever. It's scary to admit that and to make that like something that you share so publicly, but it's only after I started kind of embracing that did my writing get better, did that people started connecting to my material more. So I would say lean into that stuff when you're applying.
Honesty.
Yes.
Yeah. That's so good. And then also to never give up, right? I mean,
oh yeah,
that's
don't
a
give
good,
up.
right? Because if you think about it, how many people applied, Robert, to the directing program?
So the directing program, 1,000 people.
And how many
applied.
spots?
4 to 6.
4 to 6, right? So if you think about that, there are so many people who are qualified who are not getting in. And sometimes, and I felt this way, when I got in the top 20, because there's like cuts at every round, it was like very intense. And at one of the final levels, I looked around and I knew everybody. There was 20 of us. And we're talking about like Sundance winners, Con winners, South by, people who had stuff that I had seen and loved. And you realize that it depends on the circumstances. And so this is kind of something I also wanted to say, like, moving forward in your career is a combination of preparation and luck. So always be prepared, because you don't know, like, outside of your control when the opportunity is going to come. So like with Emman, right? Always be prepared, like 7 times. Never give up, because some things are outside of your control, like 1,000 to 5, right? It's outside of your control.
And then in terms of the writers program, it was 2,200 to 8. So yeah, the odds are it's worse than an Ivy League application. But you know, we always keep our programs smaller because with our writers, you know, we don't guarantee staffing, but that is our goal. Out of the 2020 class, all of them have been staffed. The 2022 class, 6 of the 8, and then we recently announced the 2024 class, and there's 8 of them. 4 of them are about, we have 3 staffed, and then 1's about to get staffed. So it's really focusing on, like, we can do programs every day, you know, like we can give you access, we can give you, but the goal is to make sure that there's a job after the program, because if there's no job, the program is moot. You know, it's like, yes, we can give you access, but we need to make sure that there's jobs, and we're, you know, also focused on trajectory. It's not only the first episode, or it's not the first staffing gig. It's making sure that we keep our talent within the NBCU ecosystem, because they can just go, like, for example, Sunny, who is the creator of Beef, was part of our program. If we took the philosophy of keeping them in there, we could have had, you know, that successful show. So it's just like re-evaluating and making sure that we're keeping our talent within the ecosystem.
Can I also just add, because I saw some people's reactions to the numbers, and the reason why I wanted to bring that up isn't to discourage people from applying or going for it, because you should. It's just so that you don't take it personally, like Emman was saying. If the opportunity that you've worked so hard to pursue doesn't pan out, because it means that there are other opportunities, right, that they will come. So I just wanted to make that clear. It wasn't to discourage you guys.
I think just like Jean said, you know, it happens like at the perfect time, you know. So keep doing it, keep applying, and you know, you'll get in if you really, you know, are ready. In terms of, you know, just creative, what is the most influential TV show or movie that has had an impact on you, not only as a person, but on maybe even on your sensibility as a creative?
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned I Love Lucy earlier. I still watch I Love Lucy every day to this day. It's like I can quote every episode. It's just like such a groundbreaking TV show, but it's still funny 50 plus years later. So that's a big one for me. And then like NBC workplace comedies have been really big for me, like The Office, 30 Rock, Parks and Recreation, Superstore. Like those are shows that I grew up on, and I feel like my sense of humor really comes from like those shows. And then there was this one show that I don't know if a lot of people don't know this show, Strangers with Candy. It was from the early 2000s, starring Emman Sadorra. It was the craziest. Like, watch. It's on Paramount Plus. Like, if you want to watch old episodes of it, but I shouldn't have been watching it at the age that I was watching because it's very adult, and I was like raised very Christian, and I wasn't allowed to be watching stuff like that. But I think that's why I loved it so much. It was just so like they took really big swings on that show, and it was a brave show, and it made me want to be brave in my writing.
I think the premise was like Emman Sadorra was like a former prostitute who
she was like an ex-con. She was like 45 years old, and she goes back to high school. Yeah. It's really funny.
It's hilarious.
So good.
Jean.
That's a tough question because there's so much great content out there. But I will say, I'm going to answer my own question, which is recently what I've been inspired by. You guys, like multilingual co-productions. It's very exciting. I feel like as subtitles become more palatable to a mainstream American audience, basically as the US catches up with most of the US population being like multilingual, I'm excited to see diversity of international content and collaborations with the States coming in. So for example, I don't know if any of you guys have seen like Shogun, Three Body Problem. There is this other show called Drops of God, which is in French, Japanese, and English. And I just love global cinema, so that's very exciting to me.
Awesome. So what's next for both of you? What's going on? What do you have in the...
Well, I'm currently working on, speaking of like being a fan of NBC workplace comedies, I'm like on a dream job right now because I'm working on an NBC workplace comedy that's supposed to be coming out this fall, and it's just been like an incredible learning experience and setting up a foundation for like my future goals, which is to like have my own show on the air someday and develop my own projects. So that's, yeah, I'm just trying to do a good job on that show right now. That's what I'm focused on.
And you just had your epised, right?
I did. I shot my first episode, which was a crazy experience. I aged 5 years. It was nuts. Like, I've been on set before as an assistant, but never as like the writer of the episode, and that was wild. And I learned a ton. I was very lucky to be paired with a director who was very kind and like nurturing of me, knowing that this was my first time. So I got very lucky. And just like the show in general, the showrunner and all the other writers that I work with have been just really lovely people to feel safe to be funny around.
What are you working on, Jean?
Well, Robert, you threw shade earlier saying that I went to the rival camp, but I am going back to NBC to do this show, which is in its second season, called The Irrational.
Awesome. So like, again, it's like we're just making sure that we are focused on the trajectories of our talent, whether they be writers, directors, and just keeping them within the NBCU ecosystem. So we'll transition to Q&A. Does anyone have any questions? Oh yeah, we're doing that.
Hello, my name's Colette. This is like super inspiring, so thank you so much for sharing so openly. I am interested in the world of scripted and like episodic, and wondering like, this trajectory, is this the usual trajectory to start being able to create your own content? And this idea that like you want to make your own show. Like, is this the way, is that you work on other people's projects until you're able to pitch your own? Yeah.
It's definitely one way. I think something I learned just being an assistant for so long in this industry is that there isn't one way, that there's so many different ways. The way that you just described is definitely like one of the main ways that I've seen, but there are people who haven't ever written or staffed on a show that sell their own shows. You know, like people like, I think Issa Rae just had a web series and she was able to get a deal out of that. The Broad City Girls did that too. So like, there's not just one way.
But for what I always tell the writers, like if you want to run your own show, you should be able to see the different positions and work your way up from a staff writer up all the way to showrunner, because if you don't know how the dynamics of a writer's room works, you won't be the best showrunner.
You need to learn how the sausage is made.
Yes, exactly. And then for you, do you think was the program beneficial for, like, in terms of getting your foot in the door? Do you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I was saying earlier, somebody has to give you a shot at the end of the day. And somebody gave me a shot, Peter Horton, who was one of the showrunners of New Amsterdam, in addition to like the entire ecosystem of NBCU that supported me. So I honestly don't know how else I would have broken in, but yeah.
Anyone? Sure.
Oh, yes.
Hi, thanks. I'm really bad at the interview portion. I don't know if I'm just like bad at selling myself but I tend to get to the final round of writing positions and then that's where it stops. So do you have any insight or advice on how to be a better interviewer?
That's one of the biggest components of our program is our workshops. Once you get into the program, we know that you're a strong writer. It's working on the soft skills, the presentation skills. So we have workshops that are focused on mock showrunner meetings. So we bring in a showrunner with an overall deal with us for this one workshop. They will go interview every single writer, like a mock showrunner meeting, in front of the rest of the class. Once that 10-minute interview happens, then we do critiques, and then on to the next writer. And that's like just throwing the writers into the fire because every showrunner is different. Some may be very cool, some may be very like cold. So it's after doing all of these mock showrunner meetings, like they are totally prepared for the real one because it's like practice makes perfect, you know? So that's one of the key things that we help, the writers in the program is that interviewing. Also, it's about vulnerability. The best interviewees are the people who can open up themselves to the interview. If you have a block, the showrunner will know that, and that's not what the showrunner is looking for. The showrunner is looking for someone who could speak to a character, who could speak to a storyline. If you have that block, that interview would not go well.
Can I ask you, have you asked for feedback? And what have you heard? Okay. When you go into interviews, what is your mindset? Like, what for you is the goal in your head? To get the position, right? Usually. Maybe there's a way to frame shift. Maybe the goal is to connect. And maybe to have some fun. And sometimes that leads to the job more easily than if you're only focused on getting the job.
That's a really great piece of advice. I've found that my most successful meetings have been where we're not even talking about what the meeting is supposed to be about. We're like connecting on personal stuff. Like you notice something, like if mine were on Zooms, like you'd notice something in their office and be like, oh, I didn't know you were a fan of that or whatever, and connect in a personal way that way. I also think, and I don't know if this is your issue, but I definitely had an issue with like nerves, and that manifested in me just talking the whole time. Just to fill the space, but like silence is okay. Like you don't have to be constantly talking, and these meetings should be like a conversation. So like you say something, they say something, you say something, they say something. I found when I was nervous that I wouldn't let the other person talk. So maybe just being mindful about like, having it be more of a conversation. If that was the issue, I don't know. You did great.
And then when you're at a staff writer level interview, the showrunner is mostly just trying to jive. Just like, can I spend a day with this person, 8 hours with this person in a writer's room? It's more of like, again, the interview just needs to just be conversational.
So speaking really quick to the nerves, sometimes as a director, you work with pretty known actors, right? And that can be nervous because you're like, okay, I'm not a fan, I'm a colleague, right? So somebody told me once, they were like, Jean, we're just all God's people. And it kind of like helped because I was like, oh, we're all just God's people. We're all just on the same level as human beings. And for some reason, like just whatever trick you can play in your brain and be like even playing field, obviously while still maintaining the respect of the positions, I think that's helpful.
Sorry, you had a question?
Oh.
You'll be next.
Okay. after that guy.
Hi. A few years ago, when Crazy Rich Asians became a huge success, there was this hope that this barrier had been broken and we'd see many more Asian filmmakers and more productions. And we've seen other successes like Everything Everywhere and Beef. But as a percentage of all Hollywood productions, it still seems like the number of Asian filmmakers is still very, very low. And I'm just wondering, do you think that there was actually a lot of progress and new opportunities that were created, or is it pretty much the same as before?
I feel like in the past, 4 years, we're up there, I think we're there's a global stage for, AAPI stories. For me, whether it be in the writer's room, movies, TV shows. So I feel like there has been an upsurge in AAPI content for the good.
I would agree that things have shifted, but I think I hear the question behind your question, which is there is a little bewilderment and potentially even frustration that the change isn't happening more and more quickly, right? And so here's a quick story. So I grew up as a concert pianist, and I was playing this Bach fugue, which is very complicated. It has all these different voices. And I was going out to this really crazy competition, and I was practicing at my piano teacher's house, Mrs. Beatrice Allen. And her husband, Manny, who had perfect pitch, calls out from the other room, D flat. And I was like, what do you mean? And he basically heard that one note that I was playing was a D instead of a D flat. And it was 2 days before the competition. So then the competition rolls around, and did I play a D? I played a D and a D flat. The worst of both worlds, right? Because when a habit is ingrained in you for so long, our industry is 100 years, right? It's gonna take time to break the habit. Right now, I think we're in a period of playing a D and a D flat. And it's gonna take some time to change, but at least the other note is getting played.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. I would agree. Let's make that TV show. I would agree that there definitely has been change, but not as fast and as big as we were hoping. But I do definitely notice small wins that are kind of when you add them all together, that we're in a good trajectory. I think it's definitely more can be done. Programs like this definitely help. And also just getting more diverse people in positions of power who are the ones who are greenlighting projects is very important too. And I think we're seeing more and more of that happen too.
Yeah, in terms of just DEI and talent development programs. So there's an AAPI myself at NBC. My boss is AAPI. There's an AAPI program lead at Sundance, Warner Brothers Discovery, and it's Lionsgate. It's I'm yes, we're incrementally making change. So I'm gonna take the positive route and just say, yeah, it's for the better.
Also, Robert does so much work for increasing inclusion, not just at NBC, but across the entire industry. He's very humble, so he won't talk about that. But his life experience, his lived experience empowers him to be committed to this progress. And so I think that's what you're talking about, right? Having more greenlighters like Robert making these changes.
Hey, thanks so much for having us. I'm curious about that $50,000 to $8 million trajectory you worked on, because that number stuck out to me specifically, and I feel like there's these inflection points in everyone's career where it's almost what did that process look for you when you were shifting maybe from proficiency to mastery to then to applying it in your own way? And I feel like those record scratch moments are really interesting. So could you share one of those moments where you're I'm really doing this, and you felt really confident in what you're doing, or you felt like you're applying what you're learning from maybe this program or just what you're doing in the field?
I think it was 8 million. No. Oh my God, 8 billion? Avatar, move over. I think it was 8 million. But that's a great question. So you're asking what were the growing pains, basically? Is that your question? oh, when they were like, Jean, where do you want the crane? I was like, yeah, I mean, I get a crane, right? What's really cool is that when you go from nothing as a scrappy filmmaker, storyteller, to having resources, I always thought, like, why can't I be fluent, like some of these, visually fluent, like some of these great directors I'm watching? And I realized, like, part of it, obviously, talent, experience, right, practice, but it's also tools. So, like, you suddenly have access to cranes, drones, the top of, like, the art department is working, like, the best art directors, like, on your show, right? And suddenly you have access to all these amazing humans and toys. And when that was happening, when people were quickly delivering options to me, and there was like a mind melding with the heads of my department, and there were options, that was when I was like, oh, this is nice. And suddenly your visual language gets stronger too, or at least more developed. Like I had a Steadicam, like New Amsterdam, one of the big things is a Steadicam to pull the two walking characters down a hallway, so stuff like that. And you're like, oh, it's not like shaky handheld anymore? Cool. Yeah.
But see, with the programs, we don't throw the directors into the deep end. It's like we prep them as part of the program, the selected director. So, Jean was New Amsterdam, so she shadowed on 2 episodes of New Amsterdam and then got a directing assignment. So we want to make sure that we're setting up the directors for success via the shadows, really immerse themselves into the production, the rhythm, the producers, the crew, the cast. So she's not like some like stranger who just pops up one day and is directing an episode. Like they know Jean and they know her face and they're used to her being on set. So it's just making sure we're setting up.
Yeah, not like a gopher who like pops out of the ground and they're like, no, But in addition, there's also a lot of education involved. Like there's speakers who come who are arranged between like actors or like regulars, series regulars on shows, and TV directors and executives and showrunners and writers. So you kind of, throughout the program, get a sense of how the sausage is made, right? And so then you go in as a more informed director.
Did you do shot lists when you were doing your indies and your shorts the way you do shot lists now for TV?
I always do shot lists. Not every director does. I'm not confident enough not to have a plan, so I always have a shot list no matter what medium I'm in. I would say the difference is the shot lists for TV, the shows that I've done have 2 to 3 cameras, which is different than a 1-camera independent production. And so my shot lists kind of look like, I use this like digital app, and it looks like a crazy like Jackson Pollock painting. There's like all these cameras moving around and like the characters walking and stuff. So it's just gotten more complicated a little bit.
And then what resource did you use to learn that?
Other directors, to be honest. I think that people talk about directing and storytelling as a team sport, but it's actually a community sport. So like everybody in this room, like we should all get to like know each other, right? Because that's who's rising up with you. And for me, what happened was when I interviewed for several shows in the final round at the NBC program, I called other directors who had directed on those shows. And I said, can you help me? What tools did you use? How did you do your shot list? How do you go from independent feature to a TV show? And a lot of them were people from the program. Like Brennan Malloy like totally helped me out in addition to other directors, and they taught me how to use these tools.
Awesome. One book that I would recommend if you want to be an episodic TV director is one by Bethany Rooney and Mary Lou Belli. It's called Directors Tell the Story.
That's right. And then also, so Directors Tell the Story is, you can just get it on Amazon. And then there's also this really cool podcast by Pete Chapman called Let's Shoot. And he brings in all these different showrunners, I think some writers too, and directors just to talk about everything that they do for work.
Any resources that you use to hone your writing?
A podcast I really love is The Screenwriter's Life it's Megalophobe and Lorianne McKenna, and they really lean into like the vulnerability of it all and how like that is the key to writing things that really connect to people, is like leaning into the vulnerability. They call it lava, leaning into the lava. And then there's this book called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott that is about like showing up every day and working on your craft even though it's not good, or like, you feel like it's not good, and just like making small strides in your art and like doing it not for the goal of like you want to like be successful, but because it's like you're an artist and you're like nurturing this creative soul that you have. That's important.
There's also the Craig Mazin podcast.
Oh yeah, Script Notes.
Yeah, he's written on The Simpsons and Chernobyl. So like this guy has done everything.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I really love the anecdotes you're sharing. I wonder, I'm a writer, and I always hear, write what you know. And I worked in tech in Silicon Valley. I grew up as the only brown person in the rural South in the 80s. And now I kind of wonder what a program like yours want to invest in somebody who you want to stay with NBC and your projects, but I'm kind of on the older side of things now, just entering this kind of industry. So I'm wondering if that's even something that's considered, or are you going to say, well, no, we want to invest in somebody who's younger?
For our programs, age is just a number. We are looking at your personal lived experience. We're looking at, coming from the South, being the only brown person in the room, all of that, and coming from tech, that's what we're looking for, because most often the showrunners are like, I'm writing for this character who's a little older, who used to work in tech, lived in the South, who do you have? And I'm like, her, perfect. So like, we are constantly looking specifically at lived experience, not anyone's age. It's what do you, like Emman said, what do you uniquely bring to the table in a writer's room? What can you as a person uniquely contribute that no one else in this room can contribute in terms of your lived experience? So yeah, that's key for us. And specifically for our applications, we read every single essay, because that tells us about your lived experience. That's our first filter, is lived experience. We want to see the diversity and just the wide breadth of experience that people may have, that that would be good for this show. So that is our first filter in selecting our writers. I think one more question. Yep.
Hi, thank you so much for being here and answering all of our questions. It's really helped me understand possibilities outside of school. I'm currently in school for film and theater, and I'm also like thinking about postgrad. I'm like, I don't know, is it LA or is it just graduate school? So this has been an enlightening talk for me to think about other possibilities. I wanted to ask about preparation. You had mentioned that applying is a lot of preparation, as well as luck. And I'm wondering, what are materials or essentials to have in preparation for applying? Does that include like experience or credits or pitch material?
Are you asking as a writer or a director?
I think for both, yeah.
So for the writers program, you need 2 original scripts. They could be 1 comedy, 1 drama, 2 dramas, whatever is your strongest pilot, and then the application, and then the essays. And then we'll go through the selection process, interviews, and then select the class. For the director's program, it's 2 narrative samples. So 2 features or 2 shorts, anything that shows us your skill as a director and your directing sensibility. And then the same thing, application, essays.
In terms of like what helped me prepare my like samples, for example, like being in a writer's group with people that I really trust was crucial. So I would definitely recommend like finding or forming a writer's group with people whose taste that you trust and you like, to give you really honest feedback. Your script, you're so close to your script because you work on it, and like, you can't tell if it's good or not anymore because you're just too close to it, that you need fresh eyes. And So yeah, just like finding people that you trust to give you really honest feedback will help you get your pilot, your sample to a place where it's ready to share for a program like this.
And I would say from like a directing perspective, there's so many tools out there now that democratize storytelling, whereas previously you'd need like short ends and actual film to shoot. So I would encourage you to make as much content as possible just to learn, but then also to think about what it is, what stories most represent not just you now, but where you want to go. So for an example is like, let's say that you are excited and interested in genre, but genre is sometimes expensive to make. But it's like sci-fi, right? CG, VFX, whatever. But horror is also genre and sometimes a little cheaper to make. So is thriller. So like, can you make something adjacent so that you have a work sample to be like, hey, here is my credibility. This will make it easier for you to say yes to hiring me for a sci-fi show. So just try to be like strategic too, as well as truthful and authentic to who you are.
I think we're at time. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean and Emman, for sharing your experience with all of us. If you want to know more about our programs at Launch, visit our website at www.NBCUniversallaunch.com or follow us on IG at NBCU Launch. Thank you.